Tim's American Beauty was made by Robust Tools, America's premier lathe manufacturer. Quality hardened tool rests and live centers too. Robust. Built to turn wood. Enjoyed for a lifetime.
Thompson Lathe Tools. Welcome to a new level of professional wood turning tools. Made by a wood turner for wood turners.
This is gonna be fun. Right.
Okay, well let's start with the roughing gouge, the big tool. Let me show you a cut here on how to do it properly. First, you touch the tool to the tool rest, nothing else. Then you grip the tool firmly and you rub the bevel and make a cutting pass. Nice clean shavings come off. It looks nice, simple, and easy, right? But remember, you have to touch the tool rest first to get those nice little cuts. And you can see by having a firm grip on the tool, that doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean. The tool doesn't move back and forth, and so it stays stable. Also with the bevel rubbing, you get really nice shavings off the wood. Okay, now let's have some fun and show what happens when you don't put the tool on the tool rest first. Ow! Happens fast, doesn't it? Look at that. And the result when that happens, you lose a big chunk of wood usually. And that's because the wood always wins. It's going to grab the tool and slam it down. But let's look at that in slow motion. It happens so quickly, there's no way you can prevent it. But look, my hand is above the tool rest. Really dangerous. Look where my finger is, by the way. This thing gets slammed down so fast and so hard, that's hundreds of pounds of pressure at least. I always wondered why people got black and blue fingers when turning. I never could figure out till I saw the slow motion of this. If I hadn't instinctively pulled back my finger just then, I would have been in a world of hurt, and we probably would have been done shooting the videos. Now, just for fun, let's look at this from a different angle. Wham! This also shows another way you can get hurt. You lose control of the tool. So I'm barely above the tool rest, right? But still, the pressure is so hard it knocks it down, flips it back, and this is the only time I got hurt shooting all these videos. You're going to see briefly that the tool kicks back into my index finger. It actually went all the way to the bone. It doesn't look like much right there, but that's because the blood had not started flowing yet. Okay, now let's take a look at what I like to call an edge catch. When you're roughing out a square blank, you don't come from the edge. It's not good. If you've got your tool positioned too deeply or at the wrong angle, it's going to catch into that wood and it's going to really mess things up. That's why I always like to start roughing out from the center of a blank and going towards the edges. If you're a new turner, you should always do that. Once you have a little experience, you can come from the edge, but obviously don't have the tool protruding so far over the tool rest like this, because it will grab it really, really hard. Now let's look at a good cut. The first one is a smoothing cut, one of my two favorite cuts to make with a roughing gouge. You can see I have the tool on the tool rest, the bevel's rubbing, and I have a firm grip on the tool. I've got it angled to the side so the front of the tool is pointing to where I want to go. It takes off really nice shavings and leaves a very smooth surface. The other cut I like, I call the planing cut, and this is where you present the roughing gouge perpendicular to the wood, and so you're moving the tip back and forth. This is a really good cut to use when you're roughing out a really rough blank of wood. It's easier to control and easier to hang on to. You can also see it takes a smaller shaving, which you would think might leave you a smoother surface, but in reality, it doesn't, not compared to the smoothing cut. And that is because if you look at the smoothing cut on the right, you can see that the tool is at an angle and slicing the wood, more like a skew would. Now let's talk about the term supported edge and what that means. When you're making a good cut, the wood is making contact with the tool just below the center of the tool, and the tool itself is being supported by the tool rest in line with where that cut is happening. Now, I know that sounds a little convoluted, so let me draw some lines to make it a little bit easier to explain. The green arrow is where the tool is making contact with the wood. The blue line is directly in line with that contact, and right below that blue line is where the tool is touching the tool rest. So it's supported. So in other words, all that force coming down on the edge of the tool is going directly straight through the tool, directly onto the tool rest. So of course, let's take a look at what happens when you have an unsupported edge when you're trying to make a cut. The tool makes contact with the wood and runs away. It backs up on you. So the dynamics are kind of interesting. What happens is we're making contact with the wood with a part of the tool that is not supported by the tool rest. So it rolls it. Imagine if you're on a teeter-totter and somebody 5 times your weight jumps on the other end. Well, you're the unsupported tool, and they're the weight of the wood pushing down. So the blue line and the green arrow, I should be making contact in that line right there, so it'd be supported cut. However, where I'm getting ready to make contact is above that, where the red arrow is. So see that yellow line? That is where the tool should be supported. And so, since it's not supported, the wood and the tool, all this wants to fix itself. It wants to make it supported. So once it makes contact, bam, it starts to roll the tool over because it needs the support. Well, when it rolls it over, you lose control of the cut, you get a deeper cut, you get a catch, and that's the result. Ugh, doesn't look good. That's a big design modification. So let's look at this from the top so you can see rotation easier. Again, I'm supporting the tool, but I'm making the cut in the wrong spot. So where the blue line is that's where it's touching the tool rest. The red arrow is where I'm trying to make my cut. The yellow line is where the tool wants to be. So you can't fight physics. It's going to try to correct itself. And when it does, you lose complete control of the tool. So what is an uphill catch? When you're doing spindle turning, they always say you need to cut downhill. That means you go from high to low. So that's what I'm doing right now. However, now I'm going to go from low to high, which means coming out of the cove, and it gets a catch. The reasoning is that you've got your leading edge right now supported, but when you start making that curve, you can see this cut here looks nice, but when you move on into the curve, you start engaging an unsupported part of the tooltip, and it wants to get a catch. It's just a subtle difference in the position of the tooltip, but you can see one results in a clean cut, one results in a catch. So let's take this to the extreme. You can see I'm making an okay cut, not great, but when I start to go uphill, I get resistance also because there's an end grain running in line with the lathe right there, so it's kind of wanting to climb on top of the tool. You can see how it wants to roll it. So it gets to be grabby and boom, it gets a little more of a catch. And look, the wood's starting to get a little shaky. So if I go in there again, boom, it tried to climb up on it. It didn't like that. So anyway, it gets really wonky at that point. So in slow motion, you can see when the tool makes contact on the right tip, the wood actually wants to climb up. Those end grain fibers are grabbing the tool. Also, it stopped the turning just a little bit on the tailstock side, and the headstock kept turning, so it twisted the fibers, weakening the wood at that point. Now this is interesting right here. Now the tool is stronger than the wood, so the wood's going to lose when the tool makes contact, but the wood is going to try to climb up and over the tool because it's weak and it's bending. So that's how you wind up snapping things in half. So since we're talking grain direction, let's talk about end grain and why you never ever cut it with a roughing gouge. You get a real difficult time. What you're seeing right now is a bowl blank, and bowl blanks are oriented, that looked good, didn't it, to where the grain is running towards you and away from you. So right now we have side grain, end grain, side grain, end grain hitting the tool. You can see the difference in that there are shavings and then there are chips. And you can see it gets a nasty catch when it gets into the end grain at the wrong point. Very tough cutting. So you see some shavings, but you see a lot of dust. The dust is the end grain as it's cutting across the tool. So as this sticks in here, you're going to see when it catches into the end grain. Okay, boom. End grain wants to crawl up over the tool just like it did in the spindle turning. And you can see how the end grain is pulled out here. Look at that. So instead of slicing the wood, you're literally tearing out chunks of it, just scraping it across basically. And it's really tough cutting, and it just tears the wood all up. That's why you want to make a slicing cut with a bowl gouge, which will leave a nice smooth surface.
Oh, gross. Oh, ugh. Ooh. Okay.
Tim's American Beauty was made by Robust Tools, America's premier lathe manufacturer. Quality hardened tool rests and live centers too. Robust. Built to turn wood. Enjoyed for a lifetime.
Thompson Lathe Tools. Welcome to a new level of professional wood turning tools. Made by a wood turner for wood turners.